Another podcast, another couple of names to talk about the Sacramento Kings potentially pursuing in a trade this offseason. RJ Barrett of the Toronto Raptors and Lonzo Ball of the Chicago Bulls. We talk about both. Sean Woodley of the Locked On Raptors podcast joins me right here on Locked On Kings.
You are Locked On Kings, your daily Sacramento Kings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And now, ladies and gentlemen, it is that time for another episode of Locked On Kings.
Hello and welcome into Locked On Kings, your podcast hub for Sacramento Kings coverage all off season long. My name is Matt George. I have the privilege of being your host here. I'm a Sacramento sports anchor and reporter for ABC 10 News. As we continue to sift the trade market, looking into every rumor that we can possibly find. Some names are a little more far-fetched than others. Many of these conversations might not even actually make it to a legitimate negotiation table, but they're fun to do here on the Locked On Kings podcast as we try and figure out what sort of direction the Sacramento Kings can go in and what players are potentially out there that help them, at the very least, choose a direction or support the direction that new general manager Scott Perry and head coach Doug Christie have talked about in their press conferences so far. So on today's show, RJ Barrett and Lonzo Ball. We're looking at two players this time. Lonzo Ball, I'm saving until the end of the podcast, the final segment. I'm looking forward to chatting about Lonzo a little bit, but we're starting with the possibility of RJ Barrett. Sean Woodley from Locked On Raptors joins me here. We talk about an RJ Barrett trade, what the fit could be like in Sacramento, what his potential value is, and ideal, I guess, trade packages from the Raptors perspective in order to bring RJ Barrett to Sacramento. So I hope you enjoy my conversation with Sean Woodley. The source might be a bit questionable, but there is a rumor around that the Sacramento Kings are potentially one of the teams interested in acquiring RJ Barrett from the Toronto Raptors. And true to form, in the middle of the offseason when the Sacramento Kings don't have a first-round draft pick, you take a rumor and you latch onto it here on the Locked On Kings podcast. Sean Woodley of Locked On Raptors joins me to break down the possibility of an RJ Barrett move, also to provide a little bit of context of what kind of player RJ Barrett is at this point in his career, if he is a player the Kings could pursue, and what it would possibly cost Sacramento to bring him here to the California capital. Sean, I hope you're enjoying actually having a first-round draft pick and enjoying your franchise still with Scotty Barnes and Brandon Ingram and having some sort of plan going forward. The Kings are in this kind of state of limbo where an RJ Barrett rumor kind of sounds appealing at this point. I'm not going to lie to you.
It's been we're spoiled for choice over at Locked On Raptors headquarters because there's also the odd sort of just kind of floating out there rumor regarding Giannis and the Raptors and stuff. And so there might be nothing to it, but when that happens, of course, I'm going to do 5 shows in a row about it because why the hell not? It's the middle of the offseason.
Yeah, so while Locked On Raptors gets to talk about the possibility of acquiring Giannis Antetokounmpo, Locked On Kings is jumping at the possibility of RJ Barrett. So don't
sound so excited, Matt.
And I don't mean that in a disrespectful way because I kind of like RJ Barrett's game. And actually, RJ Barrett has had a number of performances against the Sacramento Kings over his career where he has cooked the Kings. So there are some Kings fans that are actually kind of excited about this because they've seen him play and go, wow, he's pretty good. He's a good scorer. Problem is he's a shooting guard and the Kings have an abundance at that position. But hey, maybe you can talk yourself into playing him at the 3 a little bit if you want to add a little more length, size, and athleticism. What do you make of RJ Barrett for a team in this position of the Sacramento Kings that is definitely not 1 or 2 pieces away, but is looking to build a new and albeit kind of younger core here in Sacramento because they traded themselves from an exciting young core to Chicago Bulls West?
Yeah, I have a hard time with this one for the Kings because I look, RJ Barrett, I think, has become a better player since coming to Toronto than he was at the New York Knicks. I think that's pretty undeniable. And we can get into sort of the idiosyncrasies of his game and stuff like that. But I think for me, he's a light on defense, like you said, kind of 2-3 sort of hybrid type who, I think there's a world in which he works on the Kings. I just don't know if that world includes the Kings having a defense that ranks higher than 27th in the NBA. Like a Zach LaVine, RJ Barrett 2-3 combo. You better hope like Keon Ellis is locking dudes up. You better hope Keegan Murray becomes like a shutdown wing defender. And you better hope Domantas Sabonis can become a different player. It's tough to reckon defensively. I think offensively the fit can work. I think the thing that with RJ Barrett is he's kind of branded as this like ball dominant, probing with the ball, carries it too long, that type of stuff. I don't think that's really what he's been in Toronto, at least not when he's been at his best. This past season, when Emmanuel quickly missed the first half of the year and Scotty Barnes missed some time early on, there were certainly portions of the season where RJ Barrett was running a ton of pick and roll. He was like the nominal point guard at times. And, I think he struggled efficiency-wise because teams were able to load up on that, and he's not so good that he's able to overcome that extra attention. But I think in a proper context where he's playing more in the vein of the way he did in the half season he played after he got traded to Toronto, where he was playing in this sort of off-ball role. He was eager to take catch and shoot threes. He shot like 39% during that stretch. Mm-hmm. And the sort of big thing with him, like the weapon that they were able to totally unleash was the Raptors are a team that runs a lot of dribble handoffs. They run a lot with their bigs, kind of setting screens at the wings and stuff like that, throwing their guys in the corner off of curls. And RJ Barrett is like basically unstoppable, ripping around a curl from the corner from a good screen, catching at the nail, and just driving and scoring with his left hand. Everyone knows it's coming, but you can't stop it, especially if there's like a proper spacing environment around him where you can't kind of pinch in and help on those drives from the corners. And so I think there's an environment where he fits very nicely with Domantas Sabonis, fits very well with Zach LaVine and the shooting that Keegan Murray provides. The offense could be very good. I just think the defense could be real nasty, which is why I'm a little skeptical that this one works for the Kings. But I'm also of the mind, I know Kings fans are probably well aware of, the Kings' propensity for doing things that maybe don't make a lot of sense. Like this could totally be something where they're like, this is a genius idea, let's do it. And so I'm willing to entertain any possibility where the Kings kind of do something, even if I think it's maybe against what I would do if I were running the team.
Yeah, there's a part of all of us in Sacramento that are trying to wait to see what is the separation between action and words. Because the Kings, when they were a third seed and made the playoffs, they were at the time the best offense in NBA history. Those numbers have since been broken, mainly by the Indiana Pacers. A lot of teams passed them up though, as NBA offense continues to evolve and get faster and faster and faster. Sure. But they were just an offensive juggernaut team. And Mike Brown started preaching defense. We need to be better defensively. We need to be able to play better defense. And his emphasis on that ultimately got the Sacramento Kings away from the offensive power that they had, and they've never been the same since. Now you bring in Doug Christie, who is a former player known for the defensive end of the floor. So you naturally think, okay, this is a defensive-minded coach. But you have Doug Christie during his 51 or whatever games as the interim head coach talking about like a number of threes he wants to hit, around 50 3-pointers a game, or at least attempts per game. And he's talking a lot about the offense and trying to get this team back to an offensive level. So that's where it's like, what are you serious about and what are you not in Sacramento? Because defensively, you definitely need to be better, but the Kings are a lot closer to being great offensively than they are great defensively. So do you just take RJ Barrett if he is available for a reasonable price? And we'll get into what that price could potentially be. Do you take that, lean into that, and go, this is at least short term what we believe we should be prioritizing? And RJ, like you laid out with his two-man game, potentially with Domantas Sabonis, he fits that.
Yeah, for sure. Like if you watch how he's played with Jakob Poeltl over the last couple of years, like he's been really, really effective. And like no shade against Jakob Poeltl, but Domantas Sabonis is just a much better player at a lot of the stuff that Jakob Poeltl is good at, and then some on top of it. I think there is a lot of potential for like some really, really good offense, especially when you factor in the shooting of LaVine and the ball handling there. And with Sabonis being such a hub too, that would, kind of leave RJ not having to carry the ball a ton either, right? And like wouldn't have this huge creation burden. So yeah, like I'm of the mind, you should lean into what you have a chance to be good at. And I think the Kings do have a way better chance of being good at offense than defense. And so that's where you could talk me into RJ being a good fit. It's just like, I don't know. RJ defensively, he's had moments. Like, I think his second season, the first year the Knicks made the playoffs back in 2020-21, he was like slightly above average. He was fine. His following 3 seasons in New York, he was miserable. And he's been mostly that with the Raptors as well. Particularly as an off-ball defender, just like gets back cut to oblivion, like as his job. Just loses guys, loses his head, not aware. On the ball, like, it's weird. He should be better because on offense, he's like such a bowling ball. Guys bounce off of him. He's super strong. You would think that would translate to defense, but he's not super quick laterally. It's almost like when he's kind of moving backwards with a defender bearing down on him, the bounciness of his chest doesn't quite have the same juice as when he's got a full head of steam. And so he kind of gets moved off his spot quite a bit. There was a stretch this season where Scotty Barnes basically said, "Hey, RJ, you got to be better at defense." And he was better at defense for like 2 weeks. And then, the end of the season stuff kind of came in. March basketball took hold and we kind of lost that. But I think there is like a better defender somewhere in RJ to tap into, but sticking him alongside Keegan Murray and Zach LaVine as a 2-3-4 feels maybe like not the way to get the most out of him. Maybe there's a way where they can kind of have LaVine be the de facto point guard, and then you have, Barrett and Keegan Murray, and then maybe more of a defensive-minded 4 with Domantas Sabonis or something like that. Maybe there's a configuration I haven't thought of that makes it a little bit more tenable, but tough to square, I think, with the way it would all fit with RJ and the defense for sure.
Sean, just to be blunt, is RJ just a worse $27 million version of Zach LaVine? Like, is there just a redundancy?
I don't think they're similar players at all.
Okay.
I think LaVine has way more creation juice, pull-up shooting, just kind of quick fire scoring. I think Barrett, when he does have the ball in his hand, it's a lot more plotting. It's a lot more sort of, all right, I'm going to, take a screen and I'm going to snake the pick and roll and I'm going to probe and get guys on my hip and maybe over dribble a little bit, get to deep positions, try to finish around the rim. I think they're quite different players, and I think they could actually fit really nicely offensively. And again, it all comes back to the defensive meshing, which I think would be pretty tough to square.
Today's episode of the Locked On Kings podcast is brought to you by BetterHelp. Let's talk about something that doesn't get talked about enough: men's mental health. There's this pressure to always keep it together, to perform, to provide, never show any of your weaknesses, right? But the truth is, real strength comes from opening up and taking care of your mental well-being. Every year, 6 million men in the United States experience depression, and many go undiagnosed. But talking to someone, a friend, a loved one, and yes, a therapist can make a huge difference. Therapy isn't just for crisis moments, right? You don't have to be going through some very significant trauma in your life, unpacking things you went through when you were young, dealing with severe depression, a loss in the family, anything like that. But if you are going through that, of course, seek the help that you need. But everyday struggles are perfect for therapy. They help you provide healthy coping tools, able to handle the curveballs that life throws at you. With over 35,000 licensed professionals, BetterHelp makes it easy to find a therapist who understands you. You can connect from anywhere, switch therapists at any time, and fit sessions into your busy schedule with just a single click. As the largest online therapy provider in the world, BetterHelp can provide access to mental health professionals with a diverse variety of expertise. Talk it out with BetterHelp. Our listeners get 10% off of their first month at betterhelp.com/LockedOnNBA. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOnNBA. Well, let's talk about value for RJ Barrett then, because I mean the Raptors have a number of players that are probably higher on the value board than RJ. I mean, Scotty Barnes being at the absolute top of that. And there's a reason why I don't even ask you about him, because I already know the answer. As much as I would, as much as the King, if the Kings could handpick like a young well, he's not even a prospect, just a young player to add to their team, I have a hard time believing Scotty Barnes would not be top 3. But I think there's 28 other teams in the league that would say the exact same thing because of the type of player that Scotty Barnes is. But RJ Barrett, we're talking realistic value, and the Sacramento Kings, of course, have to make the salary work because they're not in the greatest of cap situations to be able to absorb a lot of money. We can talk about one player in particular that makes sense financially. We'll get to that. But what I want to ask you about first and foremost is, if there's anything good about the Kings not having a draft pick this year. It's the Kevin Huerter trade with the Atlanta Hawks from 3 years ago is finally over and done with. The pick is conveyed. All of their draft capital going forward is freed up through like 2032, right? They have all their first round picks, plus they have a Spurs first rounder in 2026 or 2027, and they have a Timberwolves first rounder in like 2031. So they have these assets suddenly available to them that they can do whatever they want. Big swings, medium swings, like what I think RJ Barrett would be. In terms of draft capital, what in your mind is the interest from the Raptors in draft capital, number one? And number two, you think RJ Barrett worth this amount of picks? What pops into your head for that?
So I actually have not been thinking about picks as the return for RJ Barrett really at all. I think if they're going to trade RJ Barrett, I think it's in order to kind of balance their roster a little bit. And, the thing with RJ is he's a shooting guard on a team that has like a lot of shooting guards. They have Grady Dick. They have, there you go. They have Grady Dick. They have Jacoby Walter, who they're very high on, who had a pretty solid finish to his rookie season. They have Ochai Agbaji, who's just like a rock solid 3-and-D, probably like an eighth man in a perfect world, but like could be a spot starter for you. Started a lot of games for the Raptors this past season. And when you have Brandon Ingram now, there's not a whole lot of minutes available at the 3 to kind of slide those guys in. And so there is like a log jam at the position. I think if they could turn RJ Barrett into like someone with a little creation juice or someone who can be like a backup big man or a backup front court player, give them a little bit more size in the front court or sort of stylistic diversity even, I think that'd be the ideal sort of partner. I think, a team that's really come to mind for me outside of the Kings is the Dallas Mavericks, right? They've got Daniel Gafford and Derek Lively and Anthony Davis and all these centers. If one of those centers becomes available, likely Gafford, I think there's maybe like a thing where you can kind of piece together, a Gafford and Najee Marshall and maybe Jaden Hardy or something type of deal, just players for player. And then they get RJ to kind of run some offense with a whole bunch of defense to kind of insulate him on that team. Like that's the kind of theoretical fit that I think makes a lot of sense. I'm sure we'll get into sort of who I'm looking at in the Kings roster, who I'm excited by, but I do think just players to kind of balance the roster, add some more functional depth in a league now where it's obvious, like having functional depth, having 10, 11 guys who can get you through 82 games so you can kind of test in different looks to be prepared for the playoffs is clearly the name of the game at this point with the teams that we're about to see contest the NBA Finals. I think that would be the move here, to sort of clean up that logjam with the two, maybe have a better fitting starting 5. Barrett's fit with Ingram and Scotty's like, I think an open question. We haven't seen them play together yet, so we don't know for sure, but I think it's fair to be a little skeptical of it, although I think I'm maybe higher on how it could fit offensively than some. But it really would just be a roster balancing thing to just get some other players, split that one contract into 2, as it were.
Well, look, Sean, the Dallas Mavericks traded away Luka Doncic and got handed the number 1 overall pick. So we don't need to help the other little guy out. Okay. Help the Sacramento Kings out. Don't bring that dumb team up on this podcast right now, at least for the foreseeable future. Low blow. Okay. Come on. Like work with me here. Like, come on. The return of the hero. DeMar DeRozan goes home. He gets to ride off into the sunset with Toronto, who got rid of him so they could win a championship, but forget that part. Like, come on. DeMar DeRozan going back to Toronto. Who says no? Come on.
It's a fun story. It's, as someone who loves fan service, I'd be into it. I don't think the Raptors would be into it at all. I think they just brought in Brandon Ingram, who's just like a younger, better version of DeMar DeRozan. And I think the fit with, like, they need shooting in that starting 5. I think the fit with DeRozan in that lineup would be very clunky. Like DeRozan plus Poeltl plus Scotty Barnes in the same starting 5 is kind of a crime against basketball, I think. And so as much as it would be nice and fun and narratively juicy for DeMar to return home, first of all, I don't know if Masai Ujiri wants to like go back and try to mend that bridge at this point. I know DeMar would love Toronto. He talks all the time about how much he loves Toronto, which is great. We love it. But I think, it just doesn't make sense for what the Raptors are looking for. It would just kind of be a 1-for-1 type trade that leaves them with the same predicament of too many guys at the same position, except maybe the fit's even a little worse.
675 games he gave y'all. No loyalty in Toronto, huh? you just go to Canada and just are disloyal up there, I guess. Well, okay. Well, now that
can you blame us for not being trusting of you guys down there at this point? Come on.
Wrong kind of podcast, Sean. Wrong kind of podcast. We're supposed to distract ourselves from things like that by talking about the joys of Sacramento Kings basketball. Yeah, it's way better.
Correct. Let's get
way
back
better
to it,
over here. Okay, so fine.
Yeah.
No DeMar DeRozan, no reunion, no dream, no fun, no joy, no smiling kids, just kicking puppies. Cool. What on the Kings roster then do you think the Raptors would have interest in any sort of potential RJ Barrett deal?
There's one guy who stands out to me among the rest. I guess two guys. And hey, you want some fun fan service and a return of an old hero? This trade provides that for you. A deal that works basically exactly salary-wise is Malik Monk plus Jonas Valanciunas for RJ Barrett straight up. Malik Monk is, yes, a shooting guard as well, but I think he's got a little bit more in terms of like on-ball creation juice. He can be more of a point guard for you. And hey, you want the power of Kentucky guard friendship? Emmanuel Quickley is in Toronto. Perfect landing spot after De'Aaron Fox got traded away from his best pal, Malik Monk. I think Monk would be a really nice addition to a Raptors team that had, the 26th ranked offense last year that needs a little bit more creation pop. And then Valanciunas just becomes a nice platoon backup big man, a sort of insurance if Jakob Poeltl ever gets hurt. He probably won't play a whole lot, probably 10 to 15 minutes a game in all likelihood, but as a nice serviceable backup who everyone loves in Toronto, I think that would make a lot of sense as well. That's the deal. That's kind of the one deal I see when I look at the Kings cap sheet that just like feels pretty serendipitous. I don't know how you feel about that though.
So I'm not surprised by those two names because I actually brought those two names up earlier this week. I did a podcast talking with a buddy of mine about a potential Jonathan Kuminga trade. Right. And like those two were the names that we talked about of trying to make that work financially. The Kings are in a really weird financial position, Sean, as I'm sure you've seen just by looking at the contracts. It's like they've got like Keegan at $11 million, but he's about to hit an extension either this season or maybe even this summer. Who knows? You have Malik at that 18, you have DeMar at the 24, and then nothing until you get to the 40s where Levine and Sabonis are, right? So this massive salary gap, which right in that gap, the high 20s to mid 30s, like that's around the range of player that they're, I think, trying to find. Right. So a natural combination is $28 million of Malik and Jonas Valanciunas. I hear that completely. The only hesitation, the only issue that I have with it in any trade, not just an RJ Barrett trade, but in any trade is that's two of your 8 rotational players that you have that you are moving on from. And I don't know if RJ Barrett, who is same thing with Jonathan Kuminga, a questionable return. Yep. I just don't know. Like you can't play safe and get back into the conversation if you're the Sacramento Kings, but I think there are smart risks to take. And I wonder I think the Kings would honestly be more willing to part with draft capital and take the risk on their future than move on from, and I think it's very likely, there's a very good chance that they trade Malik Monk away this year because they kind of have to. Sure. I just don't know if for a team that doesn't have a point guard and lacks ball handling, if that's the route that they would necessarily feel comfortable going.
That makes perfect sense. But let me just kind of counter back. Again, you want this like fun storybook situation going on. You want good vibes. You want a happy storyline.
You said no to it. You said no.
But
you said no to DeMar.
Look, DeMar's involved in this happy storyline as well. RJ Barrett, he's from Mississauga, Ontario. He grew up as a child of the DeMar and Kyle Toronto Raptors. He has said publicly, DeMar DeRozan is like the reason he plays basketball. He's his favorite player of all time. You send RJ to play with DeMar in Sacramento, the power of friendship again, the old wizened man sort of schooling the man who looks up to him as an idol. That's a fun little juicy storyline for a Kings team as well. And look, you run DeMar at point, you got Zach LaVine, you got RJ Barrett, Keegan Murray, Domantas Sabonis. Yeah, you're not defending anybody. You're giving up 160 points a game, but maybe you're scoring 165, baby.
You're trying to sell me a Mustang with 130,000 miles on it that has a lot of problems, and you're not showing me the car, like the Carfax or whatever it is. That's what you're doing.
Yep, 100% is what I'm doing. Yep,
that is the most American thing you could do. Is what you're what you're doing. You're trying to sell me that, and I'm not buying. I'm not buying, Sean. Well, this is a complete waste of time. It wasn't fun. I didn't enjoy myself at all. Sean Woodley always doing a phenomenal job at Locked On Raptors, killing dreams like RJ Barrett to Sacramento. Maybe it's not dead. I don't know. I don't even know how interested the Sacramento Kings would be. I think there's probably other targets for both teams that they would prefer. But, desperate times call for desperate measures in Sacramento.
Well, on that note, if anyone wants to hear about a fun trade that you mentioned earlier, Scotty Barnes, the perfect guy for the Kings to go and target. If you want to listen to the Wednesday episode of Locked On Raptors, at the very tail end, I pitch a mega trade involving the Bucks, the Kings, and the Raptors, where just maybe Scotty Barnes ends up playing for your Sacramento Kings. Go listen to that episode.
I don't even know. I don't even need to. I don't even need to know the details. I'm saying yes. I don't.
Hell yeah, let's go. Now we just got to get Milwaukee on board. We're all good.
Oh well. They might be a little more difficult to play ball with, but we'll see. Sean, go check. I'm gonna go check out that Locked On Raptors episode. I'm blocked. I want to know. I want Scotty Barnes in a Kings uniform. But Sean, I appreciate you taking the time, my man. We'll do it again soon, man.
Anytime, dude.
Locked On Kings is also brought to you by OpenPhone. If you're running a business, you know that every missed call is money left on the table. Think about the last time that you had an urgent need, right? Maybe for a plumber or some kind of service provider. And if that person didn't answer, you called that company and nobody picked up. Did you wait? Probably not, right? You just moved on to the next company that you could find. That's why you need OpenPhone. OpenPhone is the #1 business phone system built to streamline and scale your customer communications, all from an app on your phone or on your computer. OpenPhone lets you manage business calls and texts from a single app. The shared inbox feature is a game changer. Your team can jump into any conversation instantly without missing a beat, and their AI agent handles after-hour calls, answering common questions, and captures leads, so you never, ever miss a customer. OpenPhone is offering listeners 20% off of your first 6 months at openphone.com/lockedonnba. That's OpenPhone, OpenPhone.com/lockedonnba. And if you have existing numbers with another service, OpenPhone will port them over at no extra charge. OpenPhone, no missed calls, no missed customers. All right, let's talk about Chicago Bulls point guard Lonzo Ball. Now, I know what you're thinking. Matt, another trade with the Bulls? Really, you just joked with Sean Woodley that the Kings created the Chicago Bulls West with Zach LaVine and DeMar DeRozan. You want to bring Lonzo Ball in too? Why not just trade for Nikola Vucevic and just have their entire starting five here in Sacramento? I get what you're talking about. I get the sentiment. I am operating with the belief that if the Kings were to acquire Lonzo Ball, like I've been pretty consistent with, I don't think DeMar DeRozan is going to be on the Sacramento Kings come training camp. I just don't think it's going to happen. And whether it's in a Lonzo Ball trade, which wouldn't make sense, why would the Bulls want DeMar DeRozan back? Like I'm operating with the belief that if the Kings acquired Lonzo Ball, it would not be adding him to LaVine and DeRozan here in Sacramento. However, I will say the one time that LaVine and DeRozan were at their most effective, and they've even said this verbatim, it was when Lonzo Ball was healthy and when he was running the point for that team and handling those responsibilities. So we've seen it at least somewhat can work, but I'm not operating in any kind of Lonzo Ball conversation with the belief that you'd be adding Lonzo to those two and reuniting a trio of former Chicago Bulls here in Sacramento. That being said, too, like in any conversation with anybody available, period, though that kind of context doesn't matter to me, right? We can make jokes and we can talk about it and kind of just mention it as a one-off comment, but the Sacramento Kings can't say no to Lonzo Ball, a point guard that they need. They can't just say no to it simply because, we already have other former Chicago Bulls players on the team, right? That kind of context really ultimately does not matter. You say no to Lonzo Ball if you don't want to deal with the injury issues, right? Lonzo has played 70 total games over the last 4 seasons, including 2 straight seasons that he completely missed. He didn't play. He played 35 games last season, averaged 13 points and 5 assists a game, right? He has had a career that has been completely torn apart by injuries. And I acknowledge that that's not just going to go away if the Sacramento Kings were to bring him here to the California capital. What's important in this conversation is, of course, the value, right? Like, what are you trading to get Lonzo Ball here. In terms of finances, over the next 2 seasons, he's paid $20 million, $10 million a year, including next season, not this upcoming season, but the following season, 2026, 2027, is a team option, a $10 million team option. So the contract is not bad by any means. I think it's the Chicago Bulls, if they are indeed trading Lonzo Ball, understand that because of his injury issues that they can't get a king's ransom or anything for him. I don't think they could ever expect a first round pick without heavy protections attached to it, as well as some sort of matching salary. My point is, I don't think Lonzo Ball is going to cost you a lot to get. And I think the Kings are in a perfect position to go out and get Lonzo Ball and take that risk and take that flyer. Really, there is no risk, right? What, he doesn't play? Okay, so you're back to really not having a point guard. Like, and you're not just getting Lonzo Ball and saying, okay, all of our point guard problems are fixed. You obviously need to have more point guard depth than just going out and getting Lonzo Ball. The Kings, there is little to no risk of acquiring Lonzo Ball. And if it fails, whatever, you took a flyer for 1 year, you can move on from him next year, not pick up his option. Let's say he gets hurt again, barely plays, doesn't work out, whatever. Like, I think the Kings are one of the teams in the most ideal positions to take that risk or take that flyer, take that chance on Lonzo. I'm telling you, for what I believe like Lonzo Ball's value to be, I'm doing that trade almost in a heartbeat, without hesitation, if I am the Sacramento Kings, right? Just looking at the money that Lonzo Ball makes. Again, $10 million next season. That's not a lot of money by any means, right? And the value of Lonzo Ball is heavily impacted by his injury issues. So he's a $10 million per year player. You could trade Lonzo for Jonas Valanciunas straight up if you wanted to. I'm trying to figure out financially, like, if this works. You could do Devin Carter. Probably, yes. Financially, it works for the Chicago Bulls. You could trade Devin Carter and like a heavily protected first round pick for Lonzo Ball. If you wanted to do that, you could do Devin Carter and Terrence Davis straight up financially to make it work. Now, I'm not saying the Bulls are just going to give Lonzo Ball away for free. In this case, they would get either a heavily protected first, or they would get at least some sort of prospect in Devin Carter. I would do these deals in a heartbeat to take a flyer on Lonzo Ball. But that's just me. Do you feel the same way? How do you feel about RJ Barrett? Let me know. At MattGeorgeSack on Twitter. Email me, mattgeorgesports@gmail.com. Leave your thoughts in the YouTube comment section down below. Appreciate your support as always. Can't wait to have you join me on the next episode of Locked On Kings. Until then, my name is Matt George. You've been listening to the Locked On Kings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network.